Money is the lifeblood of nations, but when debt spirals out of control, even the strongest economies can crumble. International debt crises are not just numbers on balance sheets. They are stories of governments borrowing beyond their means, investors taking risks, and citizens paying the ultimate price. In the modern global economy, countries borrow to invest in infrastructure, to stimulate growth, to fund social programs, and sometimes simply to keep governments running. Borrowing in itself is not a problem. It becomes a crisis when the debt exceeds a country's capacity to repay and when external shocks disrupt the delicate balance between income and obligations. The late 20th and early 21st centuries have shown repeatedly how interconnected the world has become. A financial misstep in one country can ripple across continents, creating panic and instability. Take, for example, the Latin American debt crisis of the 1980s, when countries like Mexico, Brazil, and Argentina accumulated massive debts to finance industrialization and development projects. At first, the loans fueled growth, but when global interest rates spiked and commodity prices fell, these nations struggled to meet payments. The crisis led to defaults and restructuring programs coordinated by international institutions, but the social cost was immense. Unemployment soared, inflation spiked, and millions faced poverty. These events highlighted how external debt is not just an economic problem, but a human one. People lose jobs, savings, and trust in institutions. Governments face political instability and social unrest. The lessons were reinforced during the 1997 Asian financial crisis, when Thailand, Indonesia, and South Korea faced similar situations. Massive short-term borrowing in foreign currencies made them vulnerable to sudden shifts in investor confidence. Once panic spread, capital fled the countries, currencies collapsed, and stock markets tumbled. International intervention through the IMF and coordinated rescue packages helped stabilize the region, but the price was high. Austerity measures reduced public spending, causing hardship for ordinary citizens. Debt crises also exposed the limitations of global financial systems, when one country's problems quickly become regional or global. The 2008 global financial crisis illustrated this vividly. Private sector defaults in the United States triggered credit freezes worldwide. Governments were forced to intervene with massive stimulus packages and bailouts to prevent systemic collapse. While not all these crises were purely due to government debt, they emphasized how sovereign debt and private borrowing are intertwined. Countries with strong institutions, transparent governance, and sound economic policies can manage debt more effectively, while nations with weak systems are at constant risk. Modern debt crises are often compounded by speculative capital flows, rapid changes in commodity prices, and global interest rate fluctuations. When investors sense risk, they withdraw funds rapidly, causing liquidity shortages that can turn manageable debt into a full-blown crisis. Debt restructuring and relief programs have become tools to address these problems. The Paris Club and international financial institutions negotiate terms to extend maturity, reduce interest, or even forgive portions of debt. These mechanisms are necessary, but they cannot solve underlying structural issues. True prevention requires careful planning, responsible borrowing, diversification of revenue sources, and strong institutions that ensure public funds are used efficiently. The moral dimension of international debt crises cannot be ignored. When citizens face unemployment, poverty, and social disruption, the consequences extend beyond economics to human dignity and political stability. Countries that repeatedly default or rely heavily on external borrowing often find themselves trapped in cycles of dependency and stagnation. International cooperation is vital because no nation exists in isolation. Financial systems are interconnected. What affects one can affect all. Emerging technologies and digital finance offer new opportunities to monitor debt risks, enhance transparency, and improve repayment systems. But the fundamentals remain the same. Accountability and fiscal responsibility are key. The lessons from past crises are clear. Reckless borrowing, poor oversight, and over-reliance on volatile markets inevitably lead to hardship. Debt itself is not evil, it is a tool, but like all tools, it can be misused with catastrophic consequences. Understanding the human cost of debt crises reminds policymakers, investors, and citizens that economics is not just about numbers, it is about lives. Education, financial literacy, and civic engagement play a crucial role in creating systems that are resilient and equitable. International debt crises may be complex, but they are not inevitable. Careful management, prudent policy, and global cooperation can prevent the next disaster and protect the millions whose lives are tied to decisions made far from their daily reality. The rise of globalization has increased both the opportunities and risks countries face. Debt is no longer contained within borders, and therefore responsibility is shared. Sovereign default can trigger cascading effects across banks, markets, and even employment in other nations. Transparency, accountability, and international coordination are essential to ensure borrowing contributes to growth rather than crises. Ultimately, international debt crises are a mirror reflecting the strengths and weaknesses of global economic governance and the human impact of fiscal mismanagement. They are reminders that behind every statistic are real people people whose livelihoods, health, and security depend on sound economic decisions. Debt is a promise, money is trust, and when either is broken, the consequences ripple far beyond balance sheets. Nations, institutions, and citizens must learn from history, adapt policies proactively, and recognize that sustainable debt management is not optional but fundamental to stability, prosperity, and human well-being. The international financial system will always face shocks, but with foresight, cooperation, and discipline, the cycles of crises can be mitigated and confidence restored.